The milkshake hit him square in the face, cold, thick, dripping down his beard, as laughter exploded behind him. 3 teenagers, phone cameras out, shouting, "Smile for TikTok, old man!" The crowd chuckled. Some looked away. The homeless man just stood there, motionless, but there was something off. The way his hands trembled, not in fear, but restraint. His eyes, calm and piercing, locked on the boy who threw it. For a split second, the laughter died. The boy felt something, a chill crawling up his spine, like he'd just mocked the wrong man. He didn't know who he was. No one did. Not until the next morning when news broke of a missing officer. And that same homeless man was standing in the background of the crime scene photo, watching everything. The boy's laughter echoed down the street, bouncing off the walls of cheap diners and flickering neon signs. It was late, the kind of hour where the world feels too tired to care. The homeless man wiped the milkshake off his face with trembling fingers. The cold drink dripped down onto his torn coat, seeping into the fabric that had already known too many winters. "Hey, old man," one of the teens shouted again, his voice filled with the fake courage of someone who'd never been truly tested. The man said nothing, just stood still, eyes steady, calm in a way that didn't fit the moment. The leader of the group, a blond kid named Ryan, smirked for his phone camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his voice, "kindness challenge failed." Laughter erupted. Another kid pushed the man's shoulder. That's when it happened. The man's hand caught the boy's wrist, not violently, just enough to stop him. His grip was firm, controlled. Too controlled for someone who lived on the streets. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, Ryan saw something he didn't expect. Not anger, not fear, discipline, the kind that came from training or trauma. Ryan pulled away fast, stumbling backward. "Yo, chill, bro. We're just joking," he said, trying to sound cool, but his voice cracked and the man finally spoke. His voice was low, rough, and strangely calm. "Go home, kid. It's late." Something in that tone, quiet but sharp, froze Ryan. For the first time, he didn't feel like the one in control. He grabbed his phone, muttered something to his friends, and they walked off, laughing louder than before, just to drown out their own discomfort. When they turned the corner, the man finally let out a long breath. He leaned against the cold brick wall, eyes closed, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. From his pocket, he pulled out a small, crumpled photograph, a woman and a little girl smiling in a park. He stared at it for a long time, then tucked it back into his coat. Behind him, a streetlight flickered, and for a brief second, his face was clear under the glow. Not just an old man, not broken, just tired. A police cruiser rolled by slowly, sirens off, lights reflecting across puddles. The officer inside didn't even glance his way. The world had learned to look past men like him, but this man, wasn't done yet. Because somewhere across town, a name from his past had just resurfaced, and by sunrise, everyone would know that the homeless man wasn't who they thought he was. Morning came softly, pale sunlight filtering through the city haze, touching the wet pavement where last night's chaos had dried into silence. The man sat by a bench near a small mechanic shop, hands wrapped around a cup of free coffee someone had left him. He didn't drink it. He was staring across the street, at the shop's glass door where a sign read, "Help wanted. Mechanic needed." Inside, the shop buzzed with life. Tools clanged, engines roared, and the smell of oil filled the air. A young woman, mid-30s, strong posture, tired eyes, was managing everything. Her name tag read Mia. The man watched her for a long while, then slowly stood up and walked in. The bell above the door jingled. We're not taking scrap metal today," Mia said without looking up. "I'm not selling," the man replied quietly. She looked up and for a second froze. He looked rough but not dangerous. Dirty coat, torn gloves, yet his stance steady, straight-backed. "You got experience with engines?" she asked, skeptical. He nodded once. "A little," she sighed, glancing at the pile of unpaid invoices on her desk. "Can you fix a carburetor without breaking it?" "I can fix the whole car," he said simply. Mia raised an eyebrow. "Show me." Outside, she pointed at an old truck, the kind that hadn't moved in months. The man rolled up his sleeves. Underneath the dirt, his forearms bore faint scars. Surgical precision cuts, not random ones. Within minutes, his hands moved like they remembered every tool, every motion. He adjusted the fuel lines, tightened the clamps, rechecked the ignition. The engine roared to life. Mia blinked. That was fast. He only shrugged, wiping grease on his sleeve. Wasn't that broken? Just neglected. There was something about the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about the truck. Name? She asked. Daniel. Last name? He hesitated. Doesn't matter anymore. She gave a faint smirk. All right, Daniel. You want a day's pay? I can do that. We'll see if you're worth keeping. He nodded, eyes lowering as he mumbled, Thank you. Hours passed. Daniel worked quietly, efficiently. Every bolt, every repair, perfect. And while he worked, the shop radio played the local news. Breaking story this morning, police re-examined the disappearance of firefighter Daniel Cross, presumed dead 5 years ago after the St. Vincent rescue incident. Mia froze. The wrench slipped from her hand. Her eyes darted to the man crouched by the engine, his expression unreadable. He didn't look up, didn't move. Only said softly, You should probably turn that off. The radio clicked silent. Mia whispered, barely breathing, You're him. Aren't you? He looked at her, eyes tired, haunted, and said, Not anymore. That night Mia couldn't sleep. Daniel's face lingered in her mind, those quiet eyes. That name she'd heard on the radio. She opened her laptop, typed in Daniel Cross firefighter, and the screen filled with headlines from 5 years ago. Hero saves 7, disappears in blaze. Firefighter missing after warehouse explosion. Arson investigation still unresolved. The photos showed a younger man. The same eyes. The same calmness, only then they burned with purpose. The report said he'd gone back into the burning warehouse for a trapped boy, and never came out. His badge was found. His body wasn't. Downstairs, Daniel sat by the window of the small room she'd let him sleep in. The glow from the streetlights flickered against his face. He wasn't sleeping either. He hadn't for years. He ran a finger over an old, melted dog tag, half his name still readable. Fire eats everything, he murmured to himself, except guilt. The sound of creaking stairs made him glance up. Mia stood there, holding a cup of tea. You should rest, she said softly. He half smiled. You too, she hesitated. I read about you. Daniel looked away. Then you know why I stopped being him. You save people, she pressed. And lost one, he finished. He told her then, his voice steady, eyes lost somewhere in memory. There was a boy inside. I heard him crying. I went back in. The heat. It was alive. I carried him halfway before the roof came down. His hand trembled slightly. When I woke up outside, there was silence. They said no one else made it. And I couldn't forgive myself for surviving. Mia swallowed hard. So you walked away, he nodded. I thought disappearing would make it easier for them to move on. For me to stop being a reminder, she sat across from him. And did it? He shook his head. No, because the world doesn't let you disappear completely. It finds you again when you least expect it. Silence filled the room, heavy, human, raw. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Daniel stared toward the sound. His voice turned low, almost to himself. I thought I could outrun my past, but maybe it's time I stop running. Mia watched him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, maybe you didn't survive for guilt. Maybe you survived for redemption. Daniel's eyes lifted to hers. Tired, but alive for the first time in years. In that instant, a quiet understanding formed between them. Two broken people, both trying to fix something that couldn't be undone. The next morning, the video was everywhere. Girl defends homeless man. Bullies get served. It flooded feeds, news segments, reaction channels. But what none of them knew was who that homeless man really was. Mia's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her manager wanted interviews, brand deals, attention. But all she could think of was Daniel, sitting quietly in her kitchen, sipping coffee from a cracked mug, like nothing had changed. She shook her head. You didn't stand there. You endured it, but the peace didn't last. By noon, reporters were outside. One of them shouted his name, Daniel Cross, and the world suddenly remembered. The headline changed within an hour. Homeless man from viral video is missing firefighter hero. Mia froze when she saw it. Daniel just stared at the TV. The image of his old self flashed on the screen. The uniform, the medal ceremony, the story that once made people cry. Then came the footage from 5 years ago. The burning warehouse, the screaming sirens, the night he disappeared. Mia turned to him, whispering, "They know." He didn't look scared, just resolved. "Maybe it's time they do," he said quietly. That afternoon, the same grocery store where the bullying happened filled with people. The manager stood at the door, waiting, nervous. And then Daniel walked in. Clean shirt, hair trimmed, posture straight. Every head turned. Cameras followed. The bully, a young man named Chase, was there too, standing beside his furious mother. He looked smaller now, eyes darting to the floor. Daniel walked up to him, not angry, not proud. "Just calm. You remember me?" he asked. Chase nodded, throat tight. "I didn't know. I swear," Daniel interrupted gently. "You didn't need to know. You just needed to be kind." The store was silent. Even the cameras didn't dare zoom in too close. Daniel turned slightly, facing the crowd. 5 years ago, he said, voice steady. "People called me a hero, but I let that word burn with everything else that night. Truth is, heroes aren't made in fires. They're made when no one's watching." He looked at Chase again, not with anger, but mercy. "Don't let shame define you. Let it shape you." Then he walked out. No applause, no music, just the quiet sound of footsteps leaving a lesson behind. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. Reporters shouted his name, but he didn't answer. Because Daniel Cross didn't need to be found anymore. He already had been, by the one person who'd looked past the ashes. That night, the city felt quieter. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe the noise of judgment had finally run out of breath. Daniel sat by the park bench, the same one he had called home for years. But this time, he wasn't invisible. A few people passed by and nodded. One even left a cup of coffee beside him, without a word. Not pity, just respect. Mia arrived soon after, holding 2 paper bags. "You didn't show up for dinner," she said softly. "I figured you'd still be out here." He smiled faintly. "Habit, I guess. It's hard to leave the place where you learned to survive." She sat beside him, the streetlights painting warm halos around them. For a moment neither spoke, just the hum of passing cars and the quiet rhythm of life moving on. "You know," she said finally, "the world's calling you a hero again." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Heroes don't hide behind trash cans," her eyes softened. No, but sometimes they lose themselves. And sometimes they find themselves in people who still believe." Daniel looked at her. Really looked. The courage that once drove him into burning buildings now reflected in the eyes of a girl who refused to stay silent. "You changed everything with one choice," he said. "So did you," she whispered. He turned his gaze upward, the city skyline glowing like embers against the dark. "Funny," he murmured. "I used to think saving lives was about pulling people out of flames. Now I realize sometimes it's about pulling them out of shame." A moment of silence stretched between them, not heavy, but peaceful. Mia took out something from the bag, a folded paper. "Job listing," she said. "Community centers looking for a fire safety instructor. They'd be lucky to have you." Daniel stared at it for a long time, emotions caught between disbelief and gratitude. "You think they'd want someone like me?" "I think they need someone like you," she said. "Someone who's fallen and still knows the way up." He smiled. That quiet, tired smile of a man who'd finally made peace with his past. He took the paper, folded it carefully, and placed it in his coat pocket. For the first time in years, he stood, not as a shadow, not as a forgotten hero, but as a man ready to begin again.